Hi, this is Mandy Owens again from the University of Washington, taking you through this three-part training series on medications for opioid use disorder in Washington state jails. For the second part, we're going to go through the role of medications for opioid use disorder in jails, where we will hear from two jails about why they implemented a medication program, and then I will expand on this a little further. So, to start us off, I will be going through some questions and answers with Lieutenant Sapp.
Hi, everyone. I am Lieutenant Penelope Sapp. I'm the support lieutenant for the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office Jail. A little background information about our facility. We have 461 beds. 382 of those are delegated for general population, and the other 79 are for intake units and discipline units. We have basically 4 pods with 4 units in them, one specifically for females. One of our pods is central pod that is double bedded cell units for males, and then a dormitory unit for our low risk male offenders, and then of course disciplinary and intake unit is our segregation.
Great. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to start off by asking, why did you start a medication for opioid use disorder program at your jail?
Well, that's a good question, and I have an easy answer. For me, I feel like it's the right thing for us to do. I've been in corrections for 18 years now, and I've seen many of our residents here several times, and just like my correction staff has as well. And you see them over and over, and we start to learn their addictions and their habits, and they come in here, they're high on some kind of drugs. We help them through the process of withdrawing, which is very cumbersome for corrections officers. You have, if they have medical detox, oftentimes they don't go to court, they'll refuse meals, and oftentimes they'll need to get transported out. So it actually is very staff intensive. But on top of that, you're helping them through this process of withdrawing, and we finally get them to that stage where they're good to go, and they're in general population, fully functioning, and they get released, and then lo and behold, a month later they're back, and we're starting this process all over again. So we see that, and we want to help them. So that's why we started the MAP program, and it's been really, really successful. And another reason I'm going to mention, and I'm sorry, Mandy, but one of the biggest reasons is, like I mentioned, the withdrawal process, and then we get them good to go. We find out after we've released these individuals that they'll go back into the community, and they'll use the same level of drugs that they were using before they were arrested, and they'll overdose and die. And that impacts the staff, because we get to know these individuals, and they're members of our community. So that's really tough, and so that's another really good reason why we started the MAP program.
Tell me about some of the other benefits that you've seen. How do people feel about getting the option for medications for opioid use disorder while they're there?
Well, I enjoy personally seeing the excitement in their eyes when they finally get the opportunity to break free from this addiction, and find another option. I think a lot of times when they're out in the community, and they really want to get off of the drugs, they can't do it alone. And so when they get here and we're like, hey, we got this MAP program, we want to help you beat this addiction, they get really excited, and they feel like the last place on earth they would have thought they would have gotten this type of help was jail. But it is jail, and that's is a great opportunity for us to help them get back on track. Other good points of doing this and benefits is when they are on the MAP program and they're staying compliant. Sometimes they have some little hiccups in life. They might have a failure to comply in court. Maybe they missed a drug treatment program or what have you, and there's a warrant issued for their arrest. They'll come back, but they'll be compliant on their MAP medication, so there's no worries about withdrawing or what have you. We just quickly bridge them on their medication, and they're good to go. They go to court, they don't refuse their meals, we don't need to worry about medical transports. So it's all beneficial for the corrections staff and the individual that's on the program. And then finally, and this is for me the best part of it, is hearing the successes. So, you know, we're Kitsap County, it's not a small community, but it still has that small community type of mentality. And I'll be out in the community at the grocery store or what have you, and there's nothing more impactful for me to see someone that has been on our MAP program walk up to me and say, "Hey, Lieutenant Sapp, I'm doing really good. I've been clean for 6 months. I got a job. I'm engaged. My girlfriend's having a baby, and thanks for all your help." And that to me is the best benefit, because we work in corrections, we work in a jail, we work in these concrete buildings, and we don't often get to see those positive stories or feel those positive impacts. And this program has made me feel for the first time in my career that I'm actually making a difference in someone's life.
Has having a medication program changed the opinions of your staff?
Yes, it has. I mean, they see the positive impacts, not only, you know, in the things that I mentioned before, that, you know, the patients are going to court quicker, because when you're withdrawing, oftentimes they'll sit in their cells for 3, 4, 5 days, sometimes a week. They just want to sleep off their process, you know, their withdrawal process. And the officers are seeing the more positive benefits of that, because like I said, they're going to court, they're eating, they're not getting transported. I mean, for anyone that's in corrections knows those medical transports, you know, it's the end of your shift, you're thinking you're going to go home, and then you find out you got to do a medical transport. That's not fun. But you know, that's one of the obvious benefits. And then of course, you know, if they're on the MAP program, or if we do a withdrawal process, you know, we do a buprenorphine taper. That's very helpful for them too, because back in the day we used to do just, and I'll refer to them as comfort meds and Gatorade, and it was basically having the person just go cold turkey, and it was very difficult for them. It's I would say less humane. With the Bupe taper that we utilize now, it's easier to just, you know, slowly taper them off and then talk to them about the options of the MAP program. So that's good. It gets the officers interacting with them. They, you know, our officers do a really good job of noticing when somebody might slip through the cracks at intake, because, you know, we ask them those questions. You know, are you taking any illegal drugs? And we hope that they'll be honest, because all we care about is yes or no. We're not here to charge them with any more crimes. We just want to make sure that if they are taking something, that we monitor their withdrawing process. And if they're not honest with us, and they, you know, they get into general population and we start noticing some differences in their behavior or their health, the officers are really keyed into that, and they will notify medical. And on top of that, the intake officers in booking, they'll hear, you know, someone say, I'm you know, I use heroin, and that's when the officers will tell them, well, hey, we got this great MAP program, and then they'll refer them to it. So there's all these great concepts.
Yeah, and you've mentioned before how maybe at first some staff were a little worried about having this kind of program, and that it would change workflows, and having to communicate why you all were starting this program, but that as officers started to learn about people's stories, that really helped to better understand maybe why some people become addicted to opioids.
Yeah, good point. So, I mean, in corrections, we're constantly changing and we're progressing, and we work in a career field where, you know, tomorrow there will be something new. As a corrections officer myself, I always just want to know the why. Why are we doing this? And then, you know, the easiest answer is it's the right thing to do. So we tell them about the program, the officers, and we reinforce the positive parts of it, like I mentioned many times about the medical transports and what have you. So Once they see that and understand that, it's really easy for them, for the buy-in and what have you. And the workflow, it's also taking into account, what works for Kitsap might not work for other jails, but you can mold your MAT program to fit your facility. And it's also getting that input from the officers. If one thing's not working, well, then let's find a way that it'll make sure it works in the process of getting through operations. And then as far as like the impacts, well, okay, so we're initiating this MAT program, but let's look at what we're not doing anymore. You don't need to worry about more medical transports and what have you. So.
And you've started to see some of the interactions improve between officers and residents too, like during med lines and things like that, being able to actually talk to each other.
Absolutely. I mean, we're gonna touch on diversion and how we deliver medication, but during that MAT distribution process, the patients are sitting on the bench, and there's a good time for the patients and the officers to interact, and the patients will talk about how excited they are. I mean, I've done the MAT Medline many times, and I love engaging with the patients, and so that's a good opportunity, because a lot of times corrections officers don't know the why, like why somebody has this drug addiction, and you may find out that they got injured at an on-the-job injury, and they were taking some pain meds, and pain meds turned into heroin, and so on and so forth. And there are a lot of people in our agency that are touched by drug addiction through family or friends. So we know that it's possible, and no one's safe from that. So it's just having that culture of empathy. And our staff here at the jail possess that. It comes easy for them. So just sitting there talking to the patients and learning their reasoning and their rationale for what happened is always good.
It's great to see how your staff have really taken to providing this kind of care, which can really make a positive difference in someone's life.
Absolutely. And that's one of the best benefits of this job is changing somebody and getting them on the right path.
I'm Steve Sultemeier. I'm right now currently with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, and I'm working with the Franklin County Corrections Center. I've been doing jail stuff and correction stuff for about 38 years now, and I'm loving it still. And the facility that I'm working with, the Franklin County Corrections Center, is a 320-bed facility. And we contract with various facilities, corrections, Department of Corrections, and with the local jurisdictions with Pasco and Connell, U.S. Marshal's Office, and stuff like that. I look at it myself as when we have people in custody, we're supposed to be providing the best practices that can be offered out there in correctional facilities. And some, of course, are more limited than others. And I felt that the program itself would be a best practice, considering the fact that you get offenders that come into the facility that are addicted and are going to be detoxing, and this looked like the best way to assist them in that detoxing process and to keep them off of it total, if at all possible, after they leave the facility. There is a continued drain on resources through one-on-one self-harm watches and trips to the hospital and those emergency room costs, and sad but true, but internal investigations over successful suicides due to opioid use, depression, and overdoses that we see with all the time. I mean, the program itself, when you are using the program, the Suboxone and those other things that we're using, it helps minimize that part of the detoxing and depression issues that offenders go through. And that putting them on this program, putting the offenders on this program, it really minimizes the amount of time the correction staff are having to spend with the detoxing that offenders go through, that where they're threatening suicide, or they're attempting suicide, or they're depressed like crazy, or just that detoxing process where they're really sick. That whole thing in itself, the program has just showed it minimizes a lot of that impact. And then the long term of it is that the offenders, if they're using the program properly, they're not out there while inside the jail trying to get drugs into the jail and those other things that we end up dealing with on a daily basis, because they're satisfied with the program itself. And then as they're going out the door, we're hoping that it continues in that process where they can be a productive citizen in the community, versus they leave and they go right back into drugs, or they go back in and then they do an overload and overdose. And hopefully with the program itself, it keeps them from doing that as well. The staff, they see that offender that's on the program is actually being more productive, being more positive, and they ultimately have seen the benefit to it. Even when it first started, they weren't truly a believer in it, some of them. A lot of them are now believers in how the program can work. And it doesn't always work. It's not perfect. Nothing is, as you see them go out the door and come back. But there are some that have been on the program that leave that don't. And that's very beneficial to see those. It's sometimes hard to believe that we can trade one offender's drug for another and be successful both physically and mentally. And the results are proving that it actually works over time. The results also prove that it does make our jails easier, because we are dealing with a more cooperative offender, a less sick offender, and the possibility that the offender may stop offending. I mean, you're seeing that difference, and it's easier to manage. I mean, in your jail, when you've got this offender that's able to do this. And the MAP program has helped offenders progress while in custody, and some offenders have actually emailed us to let us know that they are, doing a good job. They've out there, they got a job, they're being successful, and they are willing to help teach others in custody how to make the change. And I mean, it is very hard to place a value on that. And we appreciate that, we've had a couple of offenders that make contact with us and tell us these things. I mean, they're just like, hey, I just wanted to let you know I got a great job and I'm doing good. And they're willing to come back and testify, give that testimony to other offenders. And we use that in our education and training program. And we're probably going to take advantage of that with some of the offenders that have gone through this program and been successful.
Now that we just heard from the lieutenant and commander, I will expand on what they were saying a little bit more on the role of jails in the opioid epidemic. This was a research study done in Washington State that looked at the risk of death experienced by people being released from prisons. What they found was that during the first 2 weeks after release from prison, the risk of drug overdose was 129 times higher among people leaving prison compared to the general population. And there's a few reasons for that. One reason is that we know that tolerance for opioids and this is true for all substances, that tolerance goes down during incarceration when people have no or restricted access to opioids. Same with other drugs. When people are then released, they may return to the same environments where they have similar access to drugs, and they may end up using the same amount of opioids as they did before they went to jail, back when they had a higher tolerance. When you combine these two factors together, this increases the chance for overdose. This is where medications for opioid use disorder can come in. We know that methadone and buprenorphine reduce the risk of drug overdose and death. When these medications are initiated during incarceration, this increases post-release treatment engagement and can also reduce illicit drug use, which would further help protect people from drug overdose and death. There is some evidence for medications for opioid use disorder initiated during incarceration in reducing criminal recidivism, but more work is needed in this area. Another way to think about this is to come back to this graph we saw in part 1. Here again, we can see that some people, as they go from new use to disordered use, they're going up and down on this roller coaster of chaos, of feeling really bad, and eventually using to just try to feel normal. Now, when people are released, they are often returned to the same environments and get back into this cycle of chaos, which is part of why many violate probation or pick up a new charge and come back to jail. For many people who start medications for opioid use disorder, they can finally get off of this roller coaster and feel normal again. When you think about the stress that comes from being released from jail, you can start to see why it would be helpful to give people the best fighting chance of returning to this quote unquote normal, both so that people don't return to this cycle of chaos, but also so that they can build the life they want to live, get a job, be there for their families, and be a part of their community. This is where we see the role of medications for opioid use disorder in jails. To start people on medications like methadone or buprenorphine while they are incarcerated, so they are more likely to continue right when they get out, which reduces their risk of overdose post-release, which literally could save their life. And second, to help people stabilize their lives during this stressful transition back into the community so that they can be less likely to go back to jail, so you don't have to see them again. And most importantly, so they can work towards living the life they do want to live. So that concludes the second part of this training series. Up next is the third and last training model on common concerns related to medications for opioid use disorder in jails. We'll hear again from Lieutenant Sapp about diversion, as well as from Victor, a recovery coach in Washington with 25 years of incarceration, who is currently taking a medication for opioid use disorder. Thank you again for your time and attention.